Turn the key on a 1975 Suzuki RE5, and something strange happens. A little curved cover on top of the gauges slides back on its own, like the visor on an astronaut's helmet flipping up. Then the engine spins to life with a smooth, turbine-like hum that sounds nothing like any motorcycle you have ever heard. Because under the bodywork, there are no pistons and no valves at all. Just a single spinning triangle, doing something no Japanese manufacturer had ever put into full production before, and none has ever attempted again. Suzuki poured a fortune into this machine, and when it failed, the story goes that they tried to wipe it off the face of the earth. So what really happened to the rotary motorcycle Suzuki wanted you to forget? To understand how we got here, we have to rewind to a time when many very smart engineers were convinced the piston engine in your car and in your bike might be living on borrowed time. And the man at the center of it all was a self-taught German inventor named Felix Wankel. Felix Wankel was, by every account, a brilliant and difficult character. He set up his own workshop back in 1924, landed an early patent for a rotary engine in 1934, and spent decades chasing one obsessive idea. He wanted to throw out the entire concept of the engine as we knew it. Think about a normal engine for a second. You have got pistons slamming up and down inside cylinders, valves flapping open and shut, camshafts and connecting rods, dozens of parts all fighting each other, converting that violent up and down motion into the smooth spinning motion that actually turns your wheel. Wankel looked at all of that mechanical chaos and basically said, why bother going up and down at all? Why not just spin? In 1951, he teamed up with the German company NSU, and on the 1st of February 1957, a prototype rotary engine coughed into life on a test bench for the very first time. Here is the genius of it. Instead of pistons, you have a single rounded triangle, the rotor, orbiting around inside a specially shaped oval housing. As that triangle spins, the gaps between each of its three faces and the housing wall keep changing shape. Those changing gaps suck in the fuel and air, squeeze it, ignite it, and blow out the exhaust, all in one continuous rotating motion. It never stops, and it never reverses direction. It just spins, smoothly and endlessly. Far fewer moving parts than a normal engine, lots of power for its size, and a turbine-like smoothness that conventional motors could only dream of. In the late 1960s, this was one of the most exciting ideas in the entire automotive world. NSU put it in a beautiful sedan called the Ro 80, and it was named European Car of the Year for 1968. And then the gold rush began. NSU started handing out licenses to build the Wankel engine, and just about everyone wanted in. We are talking around 100 companies sniffing around this technology. General Motors paid something like $50 million for the rights. Mercedes-Benz, Rolls-Royce, Porsche, Citroën, Toyota, Nissan, they all lined up. The rotary was supposed to be the future of the entire engine, and nobody wanted to be the company left behind building old-fashioned pistons. But a gold rush always plays out the same way. Almost everybody who showed up went home empty-handed. The rotary engine had a dirty little secret that would take years to fully reveal itself, and we will get to exactly how that secret destroyed our motorcycle a bit later. Out of that whole crowd of giants, really only one company, Mazda, would stick with the rotary for the long haul, eventually putting it in the RX-7 sports car, and even winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans with a screaming rotary race car in 1991. So that is the world we are in, the early 1970s. Every engineer on Earth thinks the spinning triangle is the future, and over in Hamamatsu, Japan, a motorcycle company is watching all of this very, very carefully. Now, to really get why Suzuki did what it did next, you have to understand the absolute war that was happening in the motorcycle world at this exact moment. In 1969, Honda dropped the CB750, and it basically invented the modern superbike overnight. Then in 1972, Kawasaki fired back with the mighty Z1, a 900 cubic centimeter monster that was the fastest production bike money could buy. The Japanese manufacturers were locked in a horsepower arms race, each one trying to outmuscle the others, and the whole industry was sprinting forward at 100 miles an hour. And Suzuki had a problem. Suzuki had built its entire reputation on two-stroke engines, those buzzy, smoky, simple motors. They had not built a four-stroke road bike in over 2 decades. While Honda and Kawasaki were flexing with these big, sophisticated four-cylinder machines, Suzuki needed something that would make people stop and stare. They did not just want to join the horsepower war, they wanted to leapfrog the entire battlefield with technology nobody else had. And what could possibly be more futuristic than the engine of the future? So Suzuki made the bet, the big one. Back in November of 1970, they signed a technical license with NSU to build the Wankel rotary engine. They were the 20th company to sign up. The project chief, an engineer named Shigeyasu Kamiya, had apparently been dreaming about a rotary motorcycle since all the way back in the mid-1960s. This was not a side project. This was Suzuki planting a flag and saying, "We are going to be the company that brings the rotary revolution to motorcycles." And honestly, you have to respect the ambition. Some people think Suzuki even launched the liquid-cooled GT750 two-stroke triple in 1972 partly as a warm-up act, a way to get their dealers and mechanics and customers comfortable with water-cooled, complicated machinery before the real spaceship arrived. Because make no mistake, the rotary bike they were building was going to be one of the most elaborate motorcycles anyone had ever tried to put into production. The prototype was called the RX5, which stood for Rotary Experimental, 500 cubic centimeters. Suzuki's engineers spent 2 full years testing it, and they went deep. They built around 10 special machines just to manufacture this thing, including one custom contraption whose only job was to cut the precise oval shape of the engine housing. They racked up around 20 patents just on the special coating they developed to protect the inside of that housing. This was serious, cutting edge, no expense, spared engineering. And here is the wild part. All 4 of the big Japanese manufacturers had rotary motorcycle plans on the drawing board. Yamaha showed off a twin rotor concept. Kawasaki was testing one in secret. Honda was rumored to be working on one too. But every single one of them looked at the cost and the complexity and quietly walked away. Suzuki was the only one with the nerve, or maybe the recklessness, to actually put a rotary motorcycle into full production. They were going first, and they were going alone. So let's talk about what they actually built, because the engineering on the RE5 is completely bananas in the best possible way. At its heart sat a single rotor Wankel engine, just under 500 cubic centimeters, making a claimed 62 horsepower. On paper, fine, respectable. But getting that little spinning triangle to survive inside a motorcycle turned into an engineering nightmare that Suzuki solved by just throwing more parts at it. The rotary engine ran incredibly hot, so the RE5 needed not one cooling system, but 2. It had liquid cooling for the outer housing with its own radiator, plus a completely separate oil cooling system for the rotor spinning inside, with its own oil cooler. The exhaust got so blisteringly hot, approaching 1,000 degrees Celsius, that the exhaust pipes had to be double-skinned, with little air intake grills on the front and heat shields bolted on, so the whole thing did not cook the rider's leg. There were 3 separate oil reservoirs sloshing around in there. And the carburetor was this elaborate 2-stage, 2-barrel unit with more than a dozen jets inside it. Here is the detail that really tells you everything. When you twisted the throttle on a normal motorcycle, you pulled one cable. When you twisted the throttle on the RE5, you yanked on 5 different cables all at once. 5. There was even a clever dual ignition setup with a second set of points that kicked in at higher revs just to keep the engine clean and smooth on the overrun. One motorcycle magazine reviewer summed it up perfectly back in early 1975. He called the RE5 the most elaborate motorcycle ever offered to the public and said that next to it, the Honda CB750 and the Kawasaki 900 looked like children's erector sets. That was meant as a compliment. It would not stay one for long. But Suzuki did not just want the RE5 to be the most advanced bike. They wanted it to look like it came from the year 3000. So they hired one of the most famous designers on the entire planet. His name was Giorgetto Giugiaro, And this man was an absolute legend of industrial design. This is the guy who would go on to be voted car designer of the century. He styled the original Volkswagen Golf, the Lotus Esprit, and yes, the DeLorean from Back to the Future. And Suzuki handed him their Rotary flagship. Giugiaro went all in on a cylinder theme because the Rotary was all about spinning circular motion, so he made everything round and tubular and space-age. The most famous piece was that instrument cluster I mentioned right at the start. People nicknamed it the Tin Can. It was a chrome cylinder housing the gauges, topped with that curved, translucent cover that automatically rolled open when you turned the ignition key, like a robot waking up. Even the tail light was a matching chrome cylinder, and the turn signals looked like little lollipops sticking out the sides. It was bold. It was futuristic. It was unlike anything else on two wheels. And a whole lot of motorcycle buyers took one look at it and went, "What on earth is that?" The styling was so polarizing that it became a genuine problem. And remember that detail, because Suzuki's reaction to it later tells you a lot about how panicked they got. So now, Suzuki has this incredible, complicated, gorgeous, weird machine. The launch was everything you would expect from a company betting the house. They unveiled the RE5 with an absolutely massive marketing campaign. They billed it as the smoothest touring machine ever made. They flew motorcycle journalists out for these lavish week-long test rides. And in maybe the most 1970s move imaginable, they got an actual astronaut to endorse it. Edgar Mitchell, who had walked on the moon during the Apollo 14 mission, lent his name to selling the Rotary motorcycle. Because of course nothing says the future like a guy who has literally been to space. Suzuki was so nervous about reliability that they offered a genuinely incredible warranty. If anything at all went wrong with the engine in the first year or first 12,000 miles, they would replace the entire engine. Not repair it, replace it. Why? Because they did not trust the average motorcycle mechanic to even open up something this exotic without breaking it. That warranty was generous, sure. It was also a flashing warning sign that even Suzuki knew this engine was a beast nobody understood. And then we get to the price. And this, more than almost anything else, is where the dream started to crack. In the United States, the RE5 landed at around $2,475. For comparison, a Honda CB750, one of the best motorcycles in the world, cost around $1,500. So the RE5 was nearly $1,000 more than a bike that, frankly, was faster. Over in the United Kingdom, the math was even more brutal. The RE5 cost over 300 pounds more than Suzuki's own GT750, which was quicker and lighter, and it cost only about 50 pounds less than Kawasaki's legendary Z1, a bike that was roughly 25 miles per hour faster and far easier on fuel. You were being asked to pay premium bike money for what felt like a rolling science experiment that was slower than the cheaper bike sitting right next to it in the showroom. Before we get into just how badly this all went, real quick, if you are enjoying this story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I dig up forgotten machines like this every single week, the beautiful failures and the bikes that history tried to bury, and you are not going to want to miss the next one. All right, back to Suzuki, who at this exact moment is about to get hit by the worst possible timing in the history of motorcycling. Because here is the cruel joke at the center of this entire story. The Rotary engine had one famous, unavoidable weakness. It drank fuel like it was going out of style. That smooth, spinning triangle was just not efficient. The RE5 got somewhere around 30 miles per gallon, and the low fuel warning light could start glowing after as little as 70 miles of riding. On top of that, it burned oil through its injection system as it went. Now in 1971, maybe nobody cares about that. Gas is cheap, the future is bright. But Suzuki launched the RE5 right into the aftermath of the 1973 oil crisis, when fuel prices spiked and the entire world suddenly became obsessed with fuel economy. Suzuki had spent years and a fortune building a thirsty, complicated luxury Rotary, and it arrived at the exact moment the planet decided it wanted the opposite of all those things, and the problems kept stacking up. All that complexity that looked so impressive on paper turned into a curse in the real world. Dealers did not know how to service it. Mechanics trained on simple pistons took one look at the 5 throttle cables and the 14-jet carburetor and the dual cooling systems and the triple oil tanks and basically backed slowly out of the room. The engine threw off a bubble of heat that riders complained about. The bike was heavy, well over 550 pounds with fluids in it. And for all that weight and complexity and money, the actual performance, a little over 100 miles per hour, was no better than a normal 4-cylinder bike that cost way less and never gave you a single headache. Then came the reliability scare that really did the damage. A technical glitch forced Suzuki to delay deliveries by a few months, which is never a good look. And then a problem with the carburetor forced them to recall every single RE5 they had sold up to that point. Now recalls happen. But when your big, risky, futuristic flagship gets recalled right out of the gate, the rumors start flying. People began whispering that the Rotary was unreliable, that it was a gamble not worth taking. And in the motorcycle world, word of mouth is everything. Interest just quietly drained away. How badly did sales collapse? Let me give you the single most jaw-dropping number in this whole story. In its second year on sale in the entire West German market, Suzuki reportedly sold 1 RE5. 1. A single motorcycle in a whole country for a whole year. Brand new RE5s were just sitting on showroom floors, gathering dust, well into the late 1970s, with dealers practically unable to give them away. The critics piled on too. Years later, the magazine Cycle World would put the RE5 on its list of the 10 worst motorcycles ever made, and the write-up was savage. They mocked the bike for having the mechanical complexity of a jumbo jet, the sound of a clapped-out old bomber, the performance of a mediocre little 350, and styling they compared to a high-speed train wreck. Ouch! That is the kind of review you do not really come back from. So by 1976, the dream was dead. Suzuki knew it. And this is where the story gets really telling because of how they reacted. Remember that wild, polarizing spaceship styling? Suzuki panicked and tried to walk it all back. For the 1976 model, they redesigned the bike to look as normal and boring as possible. The famous tin can instrument cluster got thrown out and replaced with ordinary round gauges, the same kind you would find on the GT750. They swapped the taillight, changed the headlight housing, deleted some of the clever ignition and oiling tricks, and just painted the whole thing black to make it disappear into the crowd. And here is the kicker. A lot of those supposedly new 1976 models were not new at all. They were just leftover unsold 1975 bikes that dealers converted with a factory kit. Some of them were quite literally old stock, painted black and rebadged. Suzuki was not really building a second generation. They were dressing up the leftover stock they could not sell. Production limped to a halt in 1976. All told, Suzuki built around 6,000 RE5s over its short, troubled life. Some sources put the number a little higher, maybe 6,500 sold, but the precise figures were never properly published, which is fitting for a bike Suzuki wanted to forget. For a project this ambitious, 6,000 units is a catastrophe. And the whole adventure had cost Suzuki an absolute fortune. It became one of the most expensive missteps in the company's history. Which finally brings us to the legend, the story in your title, the one you have probably heard whispered in motorcycle circles for decades. The story goes that Suzuki was so humiliated by the RE5, so desperate to erase it from history, that they took all the leftover tooling, the jigs, the spare parts, even unsold motorcycles, loaded it all onto a boat, sailed out off the coast of Japan, and dumped the entire thing into the sea. Gone. buried at the bottom of the ocean, like the company was trying to drown the evidence of its biggest mistake. It is an amazing story. It is dramatic, it is poetic, it is exactly the kind of ending this saga deserves. And here is the honest truth. There is no solid evidence that it ever actually happened. Every reputable source that mentions the sea dumping story is careful to call it exactly what it is, a rumor. Outlets like Silodrome flatly state that no confirmation of the story has ever been found. Writers at other respected publications have actually reached out to Suzuki directly to ask about it and got no confirmation at all. And there is a real tell here. The different versions of the legend cannot even agree on what supposedly got dumped. Some say the factory tooling. Some say the spare parts. Some say unsold bikes. When a story keeps changing its own details like that, that is usually a sign you are dealing with a myth, not a fact. So no, Suzuki almost certainly did not sink the RE5 into the ocean. But, and this is the fascinating part, the legend exists for a reason, because the spirit of it is completely true. Suzuki really did try to erase the RE5. They killed the Rotary program stone dead. They shut down the dedicated production line. They stopped developing the technology entirely, and they rarely spoke of it again, quietly moving on. They wiped it from their identity so thoroughly that you would never guess this proud, successful company once bet big on a spinning triangle. The bike was not dumped in the sea. It was dumped from Suzuki's memory. And honestly, that is almost more brutal. But here is where the story takes a genuinely happy turn. The collapse of the Rotary pushed Suzuki right back toward conventional four-strokes, and that turn would prove enormously successful. With the Rotary experiment behind them, the company committed to a new plan. So they did the most sensible, least glamorous thing imaginable. They built a normal motorcycle. In late 1976, Suzuki launched the GS750, their first four-stroke road bike in over 2 decades. And it was brilliant. They had studied Kawasaki's bulletproof engine closely, and the GS750 came out reliable, fast, and reasonably priced. It was an instant hit. The boring, conventional four-stroke that nobody got an astronaut to advertise became the bike that put Suzuki back on solid ground. There is a real lesson buried in there about ambition versus execution, but we will let that one breathe. So what about the RE5 itself? What happened to the bike Suzuki tried to forget? Well, in the most beautiful twist of all, time turned the RE5 from an embarrassment into a treasure. Today, that weird, complicated spaceship-styled flop is one of the most sought-after collectible motorcycles from the entire era. A clean, well-kept RE5 can sell for serious money now, anywhere from around $6,000 for a project bike up to $16,000 or more for a beautiful example. Jay Leno, who owns basically every interesting vehicle on Earth, has one in his famous garage, and he genuinely loves it for that turbine-smooth engine. The RE5 has been honored as a landmark of Japanese automotive technology and inducted into the Motorcycle Hall of Fame. The bike everyone laughed at became a star. Owning one is its own adventure, mind you. Because Suzuki's policy was to replace whole engines rather than repair them, they barely sold any internal engine parts, so keeping an RE5 running today is a serious challenge. But a small, dedicated community of obsessive owners around the world keeps these machines alive, remanufacturing seals and hunting down parts, refusing to let the Rotary die. The very thing that made the RE5 a commercial disaster, its rarity and its strangeness, is exactly what makes people adore it now. And the RE5 was not totally alone in its weirdness. A handful of other companies tried building rotary motorcycles too, and their stories are just as wild. The German Hercules W2000 actually beat Suzuki to the punch as the first production rotary bike, though it was a much simpler, smaller, lighter machine, and only around 1,800 were built. Then there was the absolutely insane Van Veen OCR 1000 from the Netherlands, a massive twin-rotor, 100 horsepower, shaft-driven monster that cost about twice as much as a top BMW. Fewer than 40 of those were ever made, making it one of the rarest motorcycles on the planet. And Britain's Norton had real success with the Rotary, building police bikes and even race bikes that were seriously quick. In 1992, a Norton Rotary ridden by Steve Hislop won the Senior TT at the Isle of Man, the company's first win there in nearly 20 years. So the Rotary motorcycle could be made to succeed. It just took being lighter and simpler than the gloriously overbuilt RE5. But after the RE5, no Japanese manufacturer ever mass-produced a Rotary motorcycle again. Not one. The reasons are the same ones that doomed Suzuki's dream in the first place. The thirsty fuel economy, the dirty emissions that tightening regulations would soon make illegal, the heat, the seals that wore out. The spinning triangle was a beautiful idea that the real world just never fully accepted. The plain old piston engine, the one Wankel spent his whole life trying to replace, simply did the job better and cheaper. And for decades, it just kept right on doing exactly that. The Suzuki RE5 started life as the future. The smoothest, most advanced, most ambitious motorcycle anyone had ever dared to build, with a moonwalking astronaut on the poster and a legendary designer's spaceship styling. And it ended as a punchline, a financial wound, and a ghost the company spent decades pretending never existed. It was too clever, too complicated, too expensive, and far too early. But maybe that is exactly why we love it now. Because the RE5 is proof that sometimes the most fascinating machines in history are not the ones that won. They are the brave, beautiful, ridiculous failures that dared to be completely different, even when different did not work. If you love stories like this, machines that were too wild for their own good, I have a whole video on another legendary failure that I think you will get a kick out of. It is on screen right now. Go check it out, and I will see you in the next one.